Joining us in studio, as you know, you are most welcome to give us a call 011-542-2186, or you can tweet at ANN7TV. Andile Mqitama, National Convener for Black First Land First. Mosiri Tsiane, a lawyer with the Self, and Francois Stoffberg, an economist with Efficient Group, joining us on the line. And we have Clive Ramachibela-Smith, a business editor for ANN7. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll also have Meokgo Matuba, ANC Women's League Secretary General. Andile, I'm sure, good evening to you. You now the hero or the star of the show, as it were, having been vilified, bringing up these issues of apartheid debt that needed to be ventilated, investigated, so that there's justice.
Yes, we do feel vindicated. For a while we've been saying that the whole South African economic system in minority hands is driven by institutionalized criminality. And now, I mean, first was the Public Protector's preliminary report that said ABSA actually benefited from this money from the Reserve Bank. And now the Competition Commission vindicates it again, giving us a sense of systematic, really, illegality in the banking system. And for us, the big question is looking at the responsible people, such as our Minister of Finance, who now we can say with confidence that Pravin Gordhan benefits directly from proceeds of crime, because he has shares in these banks. In fact, Investec, Standard Bank, and ABSA, he has shares in those. In fact, he has shares in all the banks. And that's why we said this minister is conflicted. He should not be allowed to become a minister. Now, we also know that the Reserve Bank, which again is the minister responsible for, has done nothing. Why has the Reserve Bank allowed a situation like this to perpetuate itself as long as it has? That is why tomorrow we march to the Reserve Bank. And we are very clear about what we want. We want the leadership of the Reserve Bank, the governor, his deputies. The governor is Lesinyo Khanyago, his two deputies in particular, Mr. Pillay and Mr. Naidu, Kuben Naidu, they must go. Similarly, we call for the president to release Pravin Gordhan from his responsibilities. If we had it, Pravin Gordhan will not be a minister to give the budget, because when he does, as you'll see, he's going to protect white capital again. He's not going to do any of the things that the president says are important to happen in this country, because he's captured, in our view, by the banking system.
Yeah, but this also flies in the whole call of the bit for economic transformation, but looking at what can be done within the constraints of the legal framework. You know, the financial or monetary policies have been hailed as the best in the world, and that are pitched against global best practices. So even if the chorus is growing to say this is corruption in its highest form, they will get away with just a slap on the wrist for now, at least. So what else would come out of this, Tsiane?
Well, from what we have, or what we would know, is that what is legitimatized, or rather what is the law at this current moment. All that we could know is that you know, there is no law that is already been placed here in South Africa. That is the current situation. All that we also know is that the president has made a proposal that there will be a new law that will be coming when he gave his SONA speech, that cartels that do or collusions that occur like this is the fines that is likely to happen. But we also know that there's been a proposal that has also been coming from the ruling party to say those that are in the helm or in the leadership of private sectors, that if they go themselves and participate in corrupt activities, something else has to happen. So I think there is a loophole that we should look into, because we cannot just say that this, we look at it in more technical way. This, we should just justify it as corruption. What has happened with these banks is nothing else. There's no collusion here. The word collusion for me doesn't make sense. What makes sense to me is corruption. Corruption has taken place. We should change our wording, and in fact we should call it what it is. It's not bank collusion. This bank corruptions. It has affected, corruption affects each and every one of the citizen of the country. Is eating away from us, and the corruption of these banks are actually eating away from us.
Yeah, no, I don't want to take away or take the wind out of the sail of how important this particular debate is, but the fact of the matter is there's a level of protection that the regulators, the banks, the whole financial sector, they're enjoying a level of protection based on the laws and regulations that we have that is very sophisticated and complicated, very difficult to prove. That's why it took so long to even bring this matter to the fore. what can be done in the immediate in terms of legislation, at least from what President Jacob Zuma had proposed in Pali?
Well, very difficult question there, Cindy. I think this is because I'm your colleague. That's why you're targeting me.
No, you get the big bucks because you're clever.
Listen, in terms of policy, unfortunately, we know that the criminalization of this particular type of action and this type of cartel was only implemented last year in April, when President Zuma officially said that there will be some sort of criminal punishment, or as it were, there'll be harsher prosecution for this kind of crime. And so there will be jail time. Unfortunately, this falls outside that scope, so that means this case goes back to 2007. It was only investigated in 2015, so meaning that these guys obviously will, I don't know if it's safe to say they're safe, but so they won't be affected, and hence the reason even in the construction industry they're now starting with the New Deal, the 30%, the empowerment. You must love our government and how easily they make these things sound, just to make sure that obviously they have to be fair. So in the light of the banks, obviously we know that the bigger banks, particularly the international banks, have been continuing doing this type of action for a long time. So for example, we know about Deutsche Bank, for example, that they got involved in Europe with faking accounts of clients and then making as if they've got more clients than what they have to increase sales, so that it looks like they're doing well and the share prices goes up. We know about Citibank in the United States, where they faked even their corporate clients, where they were found guilty to have done so and actually inflating some of the pricings that they were buying some of the currencies around the world by. They also got away with it. They get a slap on the wrist and they're gone. Until, my sister Cindy, we see somebody fall in jail by doing this kind of action, I can guarantee you almost 100% that this kind of cartel will continue, and it will continue to change the people's lives. When we have a rand shift, simply because it has been influenced by unnatural instances, when we call it market norms, what that does is they don't think that the fact that people who actually get affected is us, the taxpayers. Not only that, the poor get affected simply because it has an element where the people who are benefiting, specifically South Africa, who pretty much we import a lot of goods. So the price of the rand, the valuation of the rand, plays a pivotal role in how our people's lives are affected in terms of what they eat, because everything we get, a lot of it is actually imported, and so therefore they get affected the most. The poor get the most affected. So government needs to show a stronger and a firmer hand against these type of cartels. And if we didn't discover these things, we would think everything is honky-dory, because like you said in the beginning, the South African financial sector, for example, the JSE, #1 when it comes to security and alignment in the world, even better than the New York Stock Exchange. So it means that there are some sort of loopholes in the system that calculates them, and hence the reason we even talk about the failure of some of the rating agencies to get accurate information and to provide it with transparency. Transparency, I think, is the key.
Yeah, but I think it's also a term loosely used, as we see now with including the rating agencies themselves falling short of glory. But let's get to Francois Stoffberg, economist with Efficient Group. Francois, thanks so much for joining us. Maybe you can give us the context in terms of what the impact of this rand manipulation, corruption has or impacted the South African economy. We know the catalyst was the Nene Gate, saying that President Zuma had removed Nene and therefore we had lost 500 billion. And in fact, we know that that is a farce. So if you can just perhaps give us a rough estimate as to what the impact of this collusion or corruption has been on the economy.
Well, it's very difficult to say, to give a rand value actually to what the likely impact will be. We know it's only 3 banks that were a part of this deal. We don't know to which extent they actually did intervene. Did they underpin the rand by 1 rand to the dollar, 2 rands, 30 cents, 5 cents to the dollar? All of that will play a direct role in trying to estimate something like that. What it'll do to GDP, that's also difficult to say, because yes, it is true that imports will be more expensive, but remember, it's a bit of a contradictory point, because a weaker rand actually helps exports, as a lot of people usually do believe and hold to. So on the one end, a weaker rand helps us, and on the other end, yes, it does increase some prices of import, but trying to put a rand value to this will be almost impossible as of yet. You'll have to have a lot more information regarding to which extent the collusion did take place, and then from there you can try and estimate what the impact would have been on the economy, but you would definitely have some pros and cons, unfortunately.
But why has it taken so long to bring this matter to the public domain? Is it transformation detractors, or is it just global greed, or a combination of the two?
Now, that is the very interesting question. We don't have an answer. We don't know why these things take so long, because it went on for such a long period, how it didn't slip out, how someone didn't mess up. What makes it very difficult is if you've watched TV shows about how trading works, it's literally people sitting next to one another, getting a buy order, getting a sell order, and filling those orders. But if I know someone is willing to pay more for something, I hold out until I get the price that I want them to pay for it. So that's a natural occurrence on a trading floor. So that makes it very difficult, and that makes it even more difficult to actually prove that is what happens. And what also makes it difficult, or what would delay the time, I think, is because there are so few large institutional investors, and yeah, the whole process is actually designed, as the previous speaker also said, the regulation that the JSE is already doing, and the bank supervision from the Reserve Bank is already under such a standard that when these things do occur, it does come as a surprise, because it is so difficult actually to overstep your boundaries, because you have compliance from decades ago that follows you up every month, every quarter, biannually, every year. So it is difficult to see these things happen, and that's the only reasonable explanation I can give for why it would take so long. Okay,
but why aren't we not hearing, sorry, stay on the line, Francois, the response from those that are implicated, the leadership, executive, speaking out on this matter, short of just sending out a benign statement saying, well, we'll cooperate, we're required, and if we found to have done something wrong, we will cooperate fully. Is it just the lackluster attitude towards the fact that they will not be punished and they will get away with impunity?
No, but it is part of the South African big struggle today. Even the media, which is owned by the same people who are implicated in this theft, are underplaying this massive crime which has been committed against the people. One of the things that we as Black First Land First want to put forward is, in fact, to demand that there must be an apology to the president, the state president, from the media, from the analysts, and these banking institutions. When the 500 billion rand, which we talk about, which was shelved off from the JSE in 2015, that December, everybody said it was because of Zuma's bad decisions. Now we know that it got nothing to do with Zuma. In fact, we now can say that it was manipulation of the currency by these entities, which makes, of course, the crime of negligence by the South African Reserve Bank even more severe. I and BLF believe that there is what we call a deliberate incompetency. So the incompetency of not intervening, it is not because they don't know. It is because they are protecting these big banks. In fact, they've gone further, the South African Reserve Bank, to exclude. They're coming into the system of black banks, such as we know the Baroda Bank, which, by the way, has been cleared by the Competition Commission, but the South African Reserve Bank will not allow it to come through. Many such instances. So we need to go to the South African Reserve Bank and make sure that it belongs to the people. There's no answer outside of South African Reserve Bank must be nationalized. That's a very important step. But also we need a judicial commission of inquiry on these banks. And then, of course, the minister who is there right now has to go. There is no other possibility of re-articulating or protecting or bringing a new regime or change in the financial system without getting rid of this.
But if you were to apply all of those remedial action, if I may call them that, that, and we're still sitting with a situation where the legislation is not enforceable as yet. The manipulators are the one essentially who have the controls.
But it is. I think the president spoke I think we must commend him again. When he gave the State of the Nation address, he made the point that he signed the amendment which criminalizes this corruption, which I think we must call it corruption. We as BLF are going to test whether in fact these criminals cannot be prosecuted. We are going to open criminal cases against all these banks which are implicated from the commission report.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to get very messy in the sense that whoever's taking on the banks, as we've seen, is going to be brutalized, sidelined, marginalized, victimized, anything and sundry that you can imagine. So what does the next step entail in your expert view, Mosiri, in how the banks will react, or markets for that matter, if Pravin were to be let go of? Are we likely to see another 500 billion on the head of, I guess, it would just sit there?
Well, legislatively it's going to be, as we said, difficult to do it now. But be that as it may, this is the biggest scandal. I just want to reiterate what Andy Les just said. This is the biggest scandal in South Africa, and yet it's been downplayed. Of it all. There was a minister, Msebenzi Zwane, who at a particular stage uttered a statement that said that there must be investigations of banks. And hula-la, the DA and all its coalition parties, together as the opposition party, made a huge noise, made such an unbearable noise wanting to defend the status quo. We can never forget that. Here they are today, silent, to the deaf. We can't even hear their noise anywhere in South Africa. The other general medias are not even talking about this. And yet these repercussions, or the repercussions that happen to us as individuals of South Africa, the effect that it has had on us, to everybody in their salaries, in creation of jobs. This has even affected creation of jobs. It's going as far as to affect each and every South African, and yet nobody's taking care of it, or nobody's talking about it, except here, of course. Here we are talking about it. AN7 is making it a story. But what are other medias making about it? They're all quiet, downplaying this. The other parties, which seems to have thought at that particular stage that the bank should not, in actual fact, one would say, the so-called Justice League or Save South Africa people were out there to say, do not touch the banks. And here we got the biggest scandal of all, and nobody's talking about it.
We're going to have to leave it there, Mosiri. I'm afraid we're out of time as always. So thanks so much for your insight. Andile Mqitama, National Convener of Black First Land First, Mosiri Ntsiane, a lawyer with SALFA, and Clive Ramatibela-Smith, AN7 business editor. And on the line, we had Francois Stoffberg, economist with Efficient Group. And thanks for watching. We'll be back after this.